The late afternoon sun cast a warm, amber glow over the streets of Austin, Texas, as Ryan Carter tightened the strap of his guitar and stepped onto the small wooden stage of a cozy downtown venue. The smell of coffee, beer, and old wood mingled in the air, and the quiet murmur of patrons filled the room. Ryan took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment as the opening chords of his song echoed softly through the speakers. Every note, every strum carried the weight of a dream he had nurtured since childhood, the dream of stepping out from the shadow of his father, Samuel Carter, and carving his own name into the world of music. Ryan's father was a legend in Austin, known for his soulful voice and heartfelt lyrics that could bring tears to the eyes of anyone who listened. Samuel had spent decades building his reputation, performing in smoky bars and grand concert halls alike, earning the respect and admiration of musicians and fans across the state. Ryan had grown up backstage, watching his father command the attention of a crowd with nothing more than his voice and a guitar. Those nights had left an indelible mark on him, inspiring a fire that refused to be extinguished. But dreams, Ryan knew, came with sacrifices. At 24, he balanced his aspirations with the responsibility of caring for his father, who had recently begun showing signs of fatigue from years on the road. Between rehearsals, auditions, and late-night gigs, Ryan made sure Samuel's meals were prepared, bills were paid, and the house never fell into disarray. The burden was heavy, but it never dampened his resolve. It only strengthened it. Tonight, as Ryan sang, he let himself be fully immersed in the music. His voice carried a familiar warmth, blending effortlessly with the soft hum of the guitar. The audience listened intently, some swaying gently, others lost in thought, captivated by the raw emotion in his performance. For a fleeting moment, Ryan imagined himself performing on stages far larger than this one. With lights blazing and crowds cheering, his music touching lives beyond the confines of Austin. When the final chord lingered in the air, a hush fell over the room before applause erupted, a mixture of admiration and encouragement. Ryan smiled humbly, bowing his head. It was moments like these, small yet significant, that reminded him why he chased this dream. He was determined, not just for himself, but for his father, whose unwavering belief in him had always been the wind beneath his wings. As Ryan packed up his guitar, he felt a spark of hope. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to follow it, wherever it might lead, carrying the legacy of Samuel Carter with him every step of the way.
The morning had begun like any other in the Carter household. The sunlight streamed softly through the blinds, casting a warm glow over the modest Austin apartment. Ryan was strumming his guitar at the small kitchen table, humming a melody that had been lingering in his mind for days. Samuel, his father, sat across from him with a steaming cup of coffee, flipping through a worn music journal that had accompanied him for decades. They shared a quiet understanding, a bond built on music, love, and years of shared struggles. But the calm was shattered in an instant. Samuel suddenly clutched his chest, his face pale, beads of sweat forming along his forehead. A sharp, wrenching pain shot through him, and he sank to the floor with a groan that sent a jolt of panic through Ryan. Dad, what's wrong?" Ryan's voice trembled as he dropped his guitar and knelt beside him, fumbling for his father's hand. Samuel's breaths were shallow, ragged, and uneven. Ryan's heart pounded. Memories of childhood, lessons in music, and countless late-night conversations flooded his mind, each one reminding him of the irreplaceable man lying before him. He reached for his phone with shaking hands, his fingers dialing emergency services almost automatically. "Please, hurry," he urged, his voice cracking as he described the symptoms. Every second felt like an eternity, and Ryan's mind raced with terrifying possibilities. Paramedics arrived within minutes, their presence both a relief and a stark reminder of the severity of the situation. They carefully assessed Samuel, attaching monitors and preparing him for transport. Ryan followed, gripping his father's arm, refusing to let go even as the EMTs guided them to the ambulance. "You're going to be okay, Dad. You have to be," Ryan whispered, trying to convince himself as much as his father. As the ambulance sped through the busy streets of Austin, Ryan's thoughts spun. He remembered his father's career as a local music legend, the countless nights Samuel had played in smoky bars, his father's gentle encouragements, and his unwavering support of Ryan's own dreams. The fear of losing him was suffocating. Ryan felt powerless, realizing that all the rehearsals, performances, and accolades in his life could not prepare him for this. By the time they reached the hospital, Ryan's chest ached from the adrenaline and worry. Nurses and doctors immediately took over, rushing Samuel into the emergency room. Ryan was left in the sterile corridor, pacing, grappling with a mix of hope, fear, and helplessness. He knew with gut-wrenching certainty that nothing would ever feel the same again if he lost his father. In that moment, Ryan silently vowed to do whatever it took, not just to save Samuel's life, but to honor the legacy of the man who had given him everything.
The moment Samuel stabilized in the hospital, Ryan knew they couldn't stay in Austin. His father's condition required specialized care that only a few hospitals in New York City could provide. The decision came with a mix of urgency and fear. Relocating across the country was daunting, but the stakes were too high to hesitate. Packing their lives into a few suitcases, Ryan felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. Every item he folded and stowed carried memories of home, but home no longer felt safe for his father. The flight to Manhattan was tense and silent, the city lights visible from above like a promise and a threat all at once. Ryan stared out the window, imagining the towering skyscrapers, the endless streets, and the crowds of people rushing to and fro. He had seen New York in movies and on television, but nothing prepared him for the sheer magnitude and intensity of it. The city pulsed with energy, a place where dreams were made and sometimes broken. Upon landing, the reality of their situation hit Ryan like a tidal wave. The cost of living was staggering. Renting even a modest apartment near the hospital would consume every penny they had, and that was before factoring in Samuel's ongoing medical bills. Every street corner seemed a challenge. The cab rides were expensive, groceries were astronomical compared to Austin, and every little expense gnawed at their dwindling funds. Ryan felt the crushing pressure of being a provider while watching his father recover, knowing that he had to balance hope with harsh reality. Despite the challenges, Ryan remained determined. Each day, he accompanied Samuel to appointments, meeting with doctors, arranging medications, and navigating insurance forms he barely understood. At night, he wandered the city streets, guitar slung across his back, searching for any opportunity to perform. The music that had always been his solace now became a desperate means to survive. Ryan played in subway stations, small cafes, and street corners, hoping someone would notice him, hoping to earn enough to cover their bills. Yet the city's pace was relentless. Crowds jostled him, honking cars startled him, and the ceaseless noise made him feel insignificant. Nights were the hardest. Lying awake in a tiny apartment, listening to his father's soft, labored breathing, Ryan wondered if he had made the right decision. But every time Samuel smiled, even weakly, every time he muttered a word of encouragement, Ryan found the courage to keep going. The city was unforgiving, but he had no choice. He had to survive, for his father, for his music, and for the fragile hope that someday he could turn this overwhelming city into a place of new beginnings. The days in Manhattan blurred together for Ryan, each one a mixture of hope, rejection, and quiet desperation. He carried his guitar everywhere, from crowded subway stations to polished hotel lobbies, searching for any opportunity to perform. Audition after audition ended the same way. Polite smiles, excuses, and promises that never materialized. The city seemed to swallow his talent, indifferent to the fire in his voice and the depth of emotion he poured into every note. Ryan's frustration grew alongside the mounting medical bills for Samuel's treatment. Each doctor's appointment, Each prescription and every follow-up cost more than he could realistically afford. He found himself pacing his tiny apartment at night, staring at the ceiling, calculating numbers over and over, and wondering if he had made a terrible mistake bringing them to New York. The weight of responsibility was crushing. His father's life hung in the balance, and Ryan felt powerless to help without a steady income. Even when small opportunities arose, they often came with humiliating conditions. Bars demanded unpaid performances for exposure. Small cafes offered tips that barely covered a meal, and agencies required endless auditions with no guarantee of work. Ryan endured it all with a mixture of pride and necessity, swallowing his frustration and exhaustion to do whatever he could to support his father. Despite the challenges, Ryan's love for music never wavered. Late at night, he would sit by the window, overlooking the glowing city streets, strumming his guitar and singing softly, imagining an audience that truly understood him. Those moments were bittersweet. Music soothed his soul, yet reminded him of how far he was from the life he dreamed of in Austin. He missed performing for people who connected to him, for crowds that felt alive with energy and warmth. Here in Manhattan, the city felt cold, and every rejection cut deeper than the last. Yet Ryan refused to give up. He remembered his father's words, spoken countless times while strumming chords on their porch in Austin. "Keep going, Ryan. Talent alone isn't enough. Persistence is what turns dreams into reality." Those words became his mantra. He attended every audition he could find, networked tirelessly, and scoured the city for hidden opportunities. Even when exhaustion threatened to consume him, he reminded himself that Samuel depended on him, not just for survival, but for hope. In the quiet moments between auditions and hospital visits, Ryan made a promise to himself. He would find a way to secure work, to pay for his father's treatment, and to carve out a life in this unforgiving city. He didn't know exactly how yet, but the fire in his heart refused to die. Manhattan might be overwhelming, but Ryan was determined to survive and to make music his lifeline in the process. The day Ryan received the call from the Novak Hotel, a surge of hope coursed through him. After weeks of relentless auditions and dead ends, this opportunity felt like more than a job. It was a lifeline. The Novak Hotel was one of Manhattan's most prestigious establishments, known for its elegance, luxury, and high-profile clientele. To perform there was to be seen, to be heard, and, most importantly, to finally earn the money he desperately needed for Samuel's treatment. When Ryan arrived at the hotel for his audition, he was struck by the grandeur of it all. Marble floors gleamed under the golden chandeliers, and the soft murmur of well-dressed guests filled the air. It was a world apart from the cramped apartments, noisy subways, and small cafes he had grown accustomed to. The contrast was dizzying, but Ryan focused, carrying his guitar with steady hands and a determined heart. Andrew Novak, a tall, commanding figure with sharp features and an air of authority, watched as Ryan performed. His voice, clear and soulful, filled the opulent room, cutting through the murmurs of the background chatter. Ryan poured every ounce of emotion into his performance, letting the music tell the story of his struggles, his dreams, and the love and devotion he had for his father. By the time he finished, the room was silent for a brief, suspended moment, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then Andrew Novak's lips curved into a small, approving smile. "You start Monday," he said simply, his tone firm but not unkind. Ryan's chest swelled with relief and gratitude. He nodded, barely able to contain his excitement. This job meant more than income. It was a chance to regain control, to fight back against the despair that had shadowed him since arriving in New York. As he left the hotel, Ryan called Samuel, his voice trembling with emotion. "Dad, I got it. I have a job at the Novak Hotel. We'll be okay." Samuel's weak but proud smile over the phone lifted Ryan's spirits even higher. For the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could start to turn around. Over the next few days, Ryan immersed himself in preparation for his debut performance. He practiced tirelessly, perfecting each note and every emotion, determined to make the most of this opportunity. The job would not only provide financial security, but also a platform to showcase his talent to Manhattan's elite, potentially opening doors he hadn't dared to dream of. For Ryan, the Novak Hotel was more than a workplace. It was a chance to prove himself, to honor his father's legacy, and to carve a path toward the life he had always imagined. The lights, the grandeur, and the applause that awaited him promised a new chapter in their lives, one filled with hope, ambition, and the possibility of something extraordinary. The evening of Ryan's debut at the Novak Hotel arrived with an air of quiet anticipation. The grand ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers, their glow reflecting off the polished marble floors. Guests mingled in elegant attire, laughter mingling with the soft hum of conversation. To Ryan, the crowd felt like a living ocean, vast, sophisticated, and intimidating. He adjusted the microphone, took a deep breath, and glanced once toward the ceiling, as if seeking courage from the heavens. When the first note left his lips, the room seemed to pause. His voice, rich and soulful, carried effortlessly through the hall, cutting through the noise of clinking glasses and murmured talk. Each lyric told a story of love, longing, and resilience. The audience turned their heads one by one, drawn by the sincerity in his tone. For Ryan, it wasn't just a performance. It was a confession of everything he had endured. Among the guests was Vanessa Novak, the hotel owner's younger sister. She had arrived late, draped in a flowing silver gown that shimmered with every step. Vanessa was known for her beauty and her restless, impulsive spirit, a woman accustomed to luxury and admiration. Yet, as she entered the ballroom and caught sight of Ryan on stage, something shifted within her. His voice seemed to reach past the surface, tugging at emotions she didn't know how to name. She found herself moving closer, captivated not just by his music, but by the quiet confidence that radiated from him. There was something raw and unpolished about Ryan that contrasted sharply with the polished, predictable world she lived in. Every time his gaze swept across the audience, she felt as if he were singing only to her. Her heart quickened, a rare sensation for a woman used to having everything she wanted without effort. When the song ended, the audience erupted in applause. Ryan smiled, humbly nodding in gratitude, but his eyes searched the crowd briefly, as if grounding himself in the reality of the moment. From across the room, Vanessa's gaze lingered. She clapped softly, never taking her eyes off him, her curiosity deepening into fascination. Later that night, as guests drifted away and the lights dimmed, Vanessa found herself unable to forget the sound of his voice. It echoed in her mind long after the last note faded. There was something magnetic about him, something she couldn't ignore. From that moment, Ryan Carter was no longer just a singer at her brother's hotel. To Vanessa Novak, he was an enigma, a man who had stirred something inside her that wealth and power never could. And though Ryan didn't yet know it, this performance would mark the beginning of a dangerous entanglement, one that would test the limits of ambition, desire, and fate.
The hospital had become Ryan's second home. Between rehearsals at the Novak Hotel and sleepless nights worrying about bills, he spent every spare moment at Samuel's bedside. The sterile smell of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of machines no longer unsettled him. They were part of his daily reality. Yet even in that cold, clinical world, something warm and human waited to change his life forever. It was on one particularly exhausting afternoon that Ryan first met Emma Hayes. She entered Samuel's room with a gentle smile that instantly softened the atmosphere. Her presence was calm, her voice low and reassuring as she adjusted Samuel's IV and checked his vitals. Ryan, who had been slumped in a chair with his guitar across his lap, looked up and found himself momentarily speechless. "Mr. Carter," she said, glancing at him kindly, "your father's responding well to the treatment. He's lucky to have someone so dedicated by his side." Ryan managed a tired smile. "He's the lucky one? I'd say I'm the one who owes him everything." Emma chuckled softly, her eyes lighting up. "You must be the musician he talks about. He mentioned you once, said your voice could make angels jealous." That small moment of humor broke through the heaviness Ryan had been carrying. Over the following days, Emma's presence became a quiet comfort. She always seemed to appear when Ryan's spirits were lowest, offering encouraging words, a cup of hospital coffee, or simply a listening ear. Her empathy wasn't forced, it came naturally, as if she understood pain without judgment. One evening, after Samuel had fallen asleep, Ryan found Emma in the corridor, chart in hand. "You do so much for people," he said softly. "How do you manage to stay so kind?" She looked up, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. "I guess I've learned that kindness is the one medicine everyone needs, no matter how sick they are." Her words stayed with him long after she walked away. Ryan realized that Emma was different from anyone he had met in New York. She wasn't dazzled by ambition or wealth. Her strength came from compassion. When she spoke, he felt seen. When she smiled, the world seemed a little less heavy. As days turned into weeks, their connection deepened quietly, like a song that built in harmony without either of them forcing the rhythm. Emma became his anchor, a reminder that even in a city that thrived on power and luxury, there was still room for genuine kindness and love. And though neither of them said it aloud, both felt the same unspoken truth blooming between them. Something pure was beginning, something worth holding on to, no matter how uncertain the future seemed.
The Novak Hotel sparkled under the soft glow of golden chandeliers that evening, the air alive with chatter, laughter, and the clinking of crystal glasses. Ryan stood on the stage, guitar in hand, his voice flowing effortlessly through the room. Each note was polished yet soulful, carrying traces of longing that seemed to reach the heart of everyone listening. But no one listened more intently than Vanessa Novak, seated front and center, her eyes never leaving him. From that night onward, Vanessa's fascination grew into something far deeper and far more dangerous. What had started as admiration turned into a fixation. She began attending every performance, arriving early and leaving late. She sent lavish bouquets to his dressing room, left handwritten notes praising his irresistible voice, and even requested songs for him to sing, always romantic, always personal. At first, Ryan tried to be polite. He thanked her for her support, believing it was harmless admiration from a fan. But soon her presence became suffocating. She would stand too close when she spoke, her perfume lingering heavily in the air. "You shouldn't sing for strangers, Ryan," she told him one evening after a show. "Your talent deserves an audience that truly appreciates you, like me." Her tone carried a possessive edge that made Ryan uneasy. He smiled awkwardly, trying to deflect. "Music's meant for everyone, Miss Novak. I sing because it connects people." But Vanessa wasn't listening. Her gaze lingered on his lips rather than his words. The next day, she called the hotel manager and demanded that Ryan's schedule be changed. He was to perform exclusively at her private events and no one else's. The staff whispered about her behavior, but no one dared to oppose her. She was Andrew Novak's sister, after all, the untouchable heiress whose whims could make or break careers. Ryan's frustration grew as the restrictions tightened. Invitations from other venues mysteriously vanished, and colleagues began avoiding him out of fear of offending the Novak family. Every path forward seemed to lead back to Vanessa's control. Meanwhile, Emma noticed the toll it was taking on him. When she visited Samuel in the hospital, she would see the exhaustion in Ryan's eyes, the way he forced a smile while hiding his unease. "You don't look okay," she said softly one evening. Ryan just shook his head. "It's nothing, Emma. Just complicated." But it wasn't nothing. Vanessa's obsession had crossed a line, and Ryan could feel the walls closing in. What had once been a dream job was becoming a gilded cage, beautiful, polished, but inescapable. And somewhere in the shadows of luxury and power, Vanessa Novak's infatuation was turning into an obsession that threatened to consume them both.
The Novak Hotel's penthouse office overlooked the glittering Manhattan skyline. A view reserved for men like Andrew Novak, powerful, composed, and accustomed to control. He sat behind his mahogany desk, sifting through business reports, when the door opened and Vanessa swept in, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Her expression was troubled, her tone urgent. "Andrew," she began pacing the room, "I want Ryan Carter to perform only for me. No one else, not your guests, not the hotel events, just me." Andrew raised an eyebrow, setting aside his papers. "Vanessa," he said with mild amusement, "you can't just claim a man like property. He's an employee, not a possession." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You don't understand. He's different. When he sings, it feels like he's speaking directly to me. I won't have him singing for anyone else. Make it happen." Andrew leaned back in his chair, studying her. He had spent his entire life catering to Vanessa's whims, from expensive gifts to impulsive decisions. But this was new. Still, the protective older brother in him couldn't ignore the familiar desperation in her voice. "If it means that much to you, I'll handle it," he sighed. Later that week, Ryan was summoned to Andrew's office. The opulence of the room felt suffocating, a silent reminder of the vast power difference between them. Andrew greeted him with a polite but firm tone. "Ryan, your performances have been a great success. The guests adore you. But my sister, Vanessa, feels a special connection to your music. I'd like you to perform privately for her, exclusively." Ryan hesitated, his stomach tightening. "Sir, I appreciate the offer, but music isn't meant for one person. I came here to share it, to build a career, not to become someone's personal performer." Andrew's polite expression hardened. "My sister isn't used to hearing no. You'd be wise to not disappoint her or me. This hotel has opened doors for you, hasn't it? Don't close them so soon." Ryan met his gaze, calm but resolute. "With respect, Mr. Novak, I can't agree to that. I'm grateful for the opportunity, but I can't compromise who I am." The silence that followed was thick and icy. Andrew's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, a glint of warning beneath his calm exterior. "Very well, Mr. Carter.
I hope you don't regret that choice." As Ryan left the office, the weight of what had just happened settled heavily on his shoulders. He knew he had crossed an invisible line. Defying the Novaks, especially Vanessa, wasn't something people in this city did lightly. That night, as he walked through the neon-lit streets of Manhattan, Ryan couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that his simple refusal had lit a spark, and that soon that spark would become a fire neither he nor the Novaks could control. The chill of late November brushed against Ryan's face as he stood outside the Novak Hotel for what he knew might be the last time. The city lights shimmered against the wet pavement, and for the first time since arriving in Manhattan, he felt both liberated and terrified. Refusing Andrew Novak's demand had cost him his main source of income and possibly his safety. But freedom came with a price Ryan was willing to pay. News of his defiance spread quickly through the hotel's staff. Some admired his courage, others called it career suicide. Yet fate, in its strange way, opened another door. A week later, Ryan received a discreet invitation, an offer from Victor Palmer, Andrew Novak's most ruthless business rival. Palmer owned several elite venues across New York, from nightclubs to theaters. Unlike Andrew, he wasn't driven by family reputation, but by the thrill of conquest. When Ryan stepped into Palmer's private club, a sleek establishment filled with the hum of jazz and murmurs of wealth, he immediately sensed danger, cloaked in opportunity. Victor Palmer greeted him with a confident smile and a calculating gaze. "Ryan Carter," he said, extending a hand. "The man who said no to the Novaks. I like that. You've got spine and talent. Two things Andrew never appreciated in the same person." Ryan hesitated, wary of hidden motives. "I'm just a singer trying to make a living, sir. I don't want trouble. I just need work." Palmer's grin widened. "Work, yes, but also a stage where your voice can be heard by more than one spoiled heiress. I'll give you that. You'll perform at the Mirage, my finest club. In return, all I ask is loyalty and a little discretion." The word discretion lingered in the air like a warning. Ryan nodded slowly. "As long as I can sing, I'm in." That night, Ryan's first performance at the Mirage was electric. The crowd was lively, genuine, moved by his raw emotion and soulful voice. Applause filled the room, washing away weeks of doubt. For the first time in months, he felt alive again, free from the Novak's shadow. But freedom, he soon realized, wasn't absolute. As he stepped off stage, Victor approached, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "You're a star, Ryan, but remember, Andrew Novak will see this as betrayal, and when he strikes back, he won't aim to hurt you, he'll aim to destroy you." Ryan's heart sank slightly, but his resolve remained. "Let him try," he murmured. "I've already survived worse." He didn't know it yet, but his choice to stand under Victor Palmer's banner had set in motion a rivalry that would change everything: love, loyalty, and the fragile peace he'd been fighting to protect. It had been only 2 weeks since Ryan began performing at the Mirage, Victor Palmer's most elegant club. Every night, the crowd grew larger, drawn by the sincerity in his voice, the kind that reached beyond fame or wealth. For a brief moment, Ryan felt he had escaped the Novak empire. He could finally pay for Samuel's treatment and even dream again. But dreams rarely lasted long in New York. One evening, while Ryan rehearsed backstage, the sound of sharp footsteps echoed through the club's corridors. Moments later, the music stopped.
Whispers spread like wildfire. Andrew Novak was there. He arrived in a tailored black suit, exuding quiet menace. Victor Palmer, usually calm and smug, looked visibly tense. They met in Victor's office, the air thick with tension. Ryan, curious yet cautious, stood outside the slightly ajar door and listened. "You knew he worked for me." Andrew's voice was cold, deliberate. "You took him to provoke me." Victor chuckled, though his voice wavered. "Ryan's a singer, Andrew. I hire talent, not toys. You can't own every man who steps on a stage." Andrew's tone dropped, almost a growl. "This isn't about ownership. It's about respect. My sister is obsessed with him, and your decision is making her worse." "Not my problem," Victor said, but before he could finish, Andrew slammed his hand on the desk, startling even the guards outside. "It will be your problem," he hissed. "You forget, Victor, your liquor permits, your hotel renovations, half of them pass through my board's influence. If you don't fire Ryan Carter tonight, you'll lose everything by morning." Silence followed. Then Victor sighed, his arrogance dissolving into quiet submission. "Fine, he's yours, again." When Andrew left, Victor called Ryan into the office, his expression tight with frustration. "You've got talent, kid, but you're caught in a storm you don't understand. Novak wants you gone, and I'm not risking my empire over a singer." Ryan's throat drew dry. "So that's it? I lose my job because of them?" Victor leaned back, lighting a cigarette. "Because of her, the sister. Walk away, Ryan, before she ruins you completely." Later that night, Ryan packed his guitar and coat in silence. As he stepped into the cold Manhattan air, the weight of helplessness settled on him. His father's medical bills were piling up again, and Emma's hopeful eyes haunted him. He had no choice. He would have to go back to the very place that had stolen his freedom, the Novak Hotel. And this time, he knew Andrew and Vanessa wouldn't just want his voice, they would want control over every piece of him.
The Novak Hotel loomed like a golden cage against the Manhattan skyline, grand, polished, and suffocatingly familiar. Ryan stood at its entrance once more, his guitar case in hand, the biting winter wind brushing against his face. He had promised himself he would never come back here, yet life had cornered him. His father's recovery still demanded costly care, and the only paycheck large enough to sustain it came from the very people who had taken his freedom. Inside, the marble floors gleamed like mirrors. Every sound, heels clicking, glasses clinking, the distant echo of piano music reminded Ryan that this world belonged to Andrew and Vanessa Novak. And now, so did he. Andrew greeted him with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter," he said, his tone polished but poisonous. "I trust you'll be more cooperative this time." Ryan met his gaze evenly. "I'm here to work, Mr. Novak, nothing more." "Good. Then sing, and don't forget who gave you this stage." That night, Ryan performed in the grand ballroom under a haze of crystal lights. His voice carried through the air, smooth yet heavy with unspoken sorrow. Every lyric, every note felt like a quiet rebellion, an attempt to hold on to the man he used to be. Guests applauded, but Ryan barely heard them. He sang not for the wealthy crowd before him, but for his father's strength and Emma's quiet faith. When the performance ended, Vanessa approached him, her perfume rich and intoxicating. She looked radiant in a shimmering silver dress, eyes glinting with a mix of affection and possession. "You came back," she said softly, touching his arm. "I knew you would." Ryan stepped back slightly, forcing a polite smile. I came back to sing, Vanessa, that's all. Her smile faded into something darker. You can pretend all you want, but I know you feel something too. You belong here, with me. He swallowed hard, unable to find the right words. The truth was, her presence unsettled him. There was beauty in her, yes, but also danger, obsession, and a hunger that frightened him. When he finally returned to his modest apartment later that night, Samuel was waiting. The older man's face was weary but hopeful. Son, I can see it in your eyes. You're not happy there. Ryan sank into a chair, staring at the floor. I'm not, but it's the only way to keep you alive, Dad. Samuel's gaze softened. You've got a good heart, Ryan. Just make sure they don't take that from you. As Ryan sat in silence, the city lights flickering through the window, he realized his father was right. The Novaks might own his contract, his stage, and even his nights, but they would never own his soul. Vanessa Novak had always been accustomed to control. Control over her image, her brother's empire, and the people who dared orbit her glittering world. But Ryan Carter was different. He didn't bend to her whims, didn't melt under her charm, and that rejection fed an obsession that began to twist into something darker. At first, Vanessa's attention came in small gestures, lavish gifts left in Ryan's dressing room, private invitations to her suite after performances, notes written in elegant cursive ink that read like declarations of ownership rather than affection. Ryan tried to ignore them, pretending they were harmless signs of infatuation, but as weeks passed, her fascination turned into fixation. One evening, Ryan found his colleague, a young pianist named Lena, sitting in tears backstage. She told me never to speak to you again, Lena whispered shakily. Said if I didn't listen, I'd never play in this city again. Ryan's stomach dropped. Vanessa said that? Lena nodded. She said she could make people disappear from the Novak circuit with one phone call. Ryan clenched his fists, anger simmering under his calm exterior. He had seen powerful people abuse their influence before, but never this personally. That night, when Vanessa appeared at the edge of the stage, smiling as if nothing were wrong, he forced himself to act composed. Every instinct screamed to confront her, but he couldn't risk provoking her wrath, not when his father still relied on the Novak paycheck for medication and care. Yet the threats continued. The hotel staff whispered of Vanessa's growing instability. One hostess who mentioned Ryan's name fondly was suddenly dismissed without explanation. A photographer who took Ryan's picture for a magazine cover was mysteriously blacklisted. Then came the warning that shook Ryan to his core. An anonymous note slipped under his apartment door, written in Vanessa's unmistakable handwriting. If I can't have your heart, no one will. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. He stared out the window of his small apartment, the city lights blurring through the glass. Emma's name lingered in his mind, her soft voice, her steady kindness. He feared for her now more than ever. Vanessa's jealousy was no longer confined to the hotel. It was spreading into his life like poison. The next day, Ryan confronted Andrew in his office, his tone sharp but controlled. Your sister is threatening people, Mr. Novak. She's hurting innocent lives because of me. She's emotional, that's all. Don't take it personally. Ryan's jaw tightened. She's unstable, and if you don't stop her, someone's going to get hurt. Andrew's eyes darkened. Careful, Carter. You work for us. You don't tell us what to do. Ryan walked out without another word, his heart pounding with dread. He knew now that he was caught in something far worse than manipulation. Vanessa Novak's obsession had become dangerous, and the storm was only beginning.
The morning sky over Manhattan was pale and heavy with mist as Ryan sat on a park bench outside New York General Hospital, his hands trembling around a lukewarm cup of coffee. Inside, Emma Hayes was tending to her patients with her usual calm grace, completely unaware that Ryan had come to say goodbye. For days, he had wrestled with the decision. Every fiber of his heart screamed to stay close to her, to find solace in her kindness. But Vanessa's threats had grown too real, too dangerous. The note under his door, the fired staff members, the quiet phone call he'd received the night before from an unknown number whispering, "Stay away from her or she'll pay the price." Ryan couldn't risk it. Not Emma. Not the one person who made New York feel like home. When she stepped out of the hospital that afternoon, her smile warmed the cold city air. "Ryan," she said softly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You look tired. Is your father—" "He's stable," Ryan interrupted, his tone distant. "The surgery worked. He's resting now." Relief flickered in her eyes. "That's wonderful news. You must feel lighter." He hesitated, his throat tightening. "That's actually why I came to talk to you." Emma tilted her head slightly, sensing something off. "What's wrong?" Ryan forced himself to meet her gaze. "We need to stop seeing each other, Emma." The words fell like ice between them. She blinked, stunned. "What? Why?" "It's complicated," he said quickly, his voice trembling. "My work, my situation with the Novaks, it's out of control. Vanessa, she's dangerous. I can't put you in the middle of this." Emma shook her head, her eyes glistening. "Ryan, we can handle this together. You don't have to push me away." He stepped back, fighting to hold his composure. "You don't understand. She's already threatened people around me. I won't let her touch you. If she knows what you mean to me," his voice cracked, "she'll use you to break me." Emma's tears slipped silently down her cheeks. "So what? You think walking away will protect me?" Ryan nodded weakly. "It's the only way I know how." She looked at him for a long moment, hurt, disbelief, and love all swirling in her eyes. Then she turned away, whispering, "You're saving me, but you're breaking me too." Ryan stood frozen as she disappeared back into the hospital, the mist thickening around him. The sound of the city faded until all he could hear was his own heartbeat, a slow, hollow rhythm of loss. That night, he returned to the Novak Hotel and sang beneath the glittering chandeliers, every lyric heavy with unspoken pain. His voice trembled but never broke. The audience saw beauty in his sorrow, unaware that every note was a goodbye. The sterile white lights of New York General Hospital flickered faintly as Ryan paced the hallway, his heart pounding in anxious rhythm. Hours felt like days. Inside the operating room, his father, Samuel Carter, the man who had once filled Austin's bars with laughter and song, was undergoing a life-saving surgery that could decide everything. Ryan's palms were slick with sweat, his mind tangled with worry and guilt. He had done everything he could to afford this, sold his belongings, worked double shifts, and swallowed his pride under Andrew Novak's thumb. He told himself it was worth it. It had to be worth it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door swung open, and Dr. Bennett stepped out, removing her surgical mask. The operation was a success, she said, offering a tired but reassuring smile. Your father's stable. He'll need rest, but he's going to make it. Ryan's knees nearly gave out as relief flooded through him. Thank you, doctor, he whispered, his voice breaking. Thank you.
He slipped quietly into the recovery room. Samuel lay there, pale but breathing steadily, his chest rising and falling to the soft rhythm of the monitors. For a long moment, Ryan just stood there, taking in the sight, the proof that his sacrifices hadn't been in vain. But as the initial relief faded, another emotion began to creep in: exhaustion. He sat by his father's bedside, holding his frail hand. Samuel stirred slightly, his eyes fluttering open. "Ryan, you look worn out, son." Ryan forced a small smile. "Just tired, Dad, that's all." Samuel studied him with the quiet perception only a father could have. "It's not just tiredness. Something's wrong." Ryan hesitated, then shook his head. "It's nothing you need to worry about. Just work." Samuel's fingers tightened around his. "That hotel, isn't it? Those people. I can see it in your eyes, son. You're trapped." Ryan looked away, ashamed. "I had no choice, Dad. I needed the money for your surgery. For this." Samuel's expression softened, filled with both pride and sorrow. "You've always had a good heart, Ryan. But don't let that goodness be the reason others break you." Ryan's throat tightened. "I can handle it." "No," Samuel said gently. "You're handling them. That's different. And it'll destroy you if you stay too long." For the first time in weeks, Ryan felt seen, exposed. He wanted to tell his father everything: Vanessa's threats, Andrew's control, Emma's pain, but he couldn't. Not yet. As the machines hummed softly around them, Samuel closed his eyes, whispering, "Promise me, when I'm better, you'll walk away from that place, from them." Ryan squeezed his father's hand, his heart heavy with unspoken truth. "I promise," he said quietly, even though deep down he knew that leaving the Novaks would be far more dangerous than staying. A faint glow from the hospital window bathed Samuel Carter's room in silver light. He looked stronger now, his breathing steady and his voice firm once again. But behind his grateful eyes lingered worry for his son, who sat quietly by the window, lost in thought. Ryan hadn't spoken much in days. His face was weary, haunted by sleepless nights and the invisible chains that bound him to the Novak Empire. The relief of Samuel's successful surgery had faded into dread. He knew the Novaks wouldn't stop until they had broken him completely, or worse. Samuel's voice cut through the silence. "Ryan," he said gently, "we can't stay here any longer." Ryan turned to face him. "Dad, you just got out of surgery. You need time to recover." "I'll recover on the road," Samuel replied firmly. "This city isn't safe for us anymore. Those people, they'll keep pulling you back until there's nothing left of you." Ryan hesitated, his hands clenching around the edge of the chair. He thought of Vanessa, her obsessive eyes, her whispered threats, and Andrew, whose quiet power controlled everything from hotels to hospitals. "Leaving won't be easy," he murmured. "Andrew has connections everywhere. He'll find us." "Then we'll make sure he can't," Samuel said, his tone resolute. "You're smart, Ryan. You'll figure it out." That night, Ryan walked through the quiet Manhattan streets, his mind spinning. The neon lights reflected off the wet pavement like fading dreams. Every step he took toward home felt like a step closer to danger. But Samuel was right. If they stayed, the Novaks would crush them. He needed help. His thoughts turned to Emma. Despite the heartbreak he'd forced between them, she was the only person he trusted. The next morning, Ryan found her outside the hospital, sipping coffee before her shift. When she saw him, her guarded expression softened. "Ryan?" she said quietly. "I didn't think I'd see you again." He took a deep breath. "I know what I said before, but I need your help. I'm leaving New York with my father, and I want you to come with us."
Emma's eyes widened. You mean for good? Yes, he nodded. Vanessa and Andrew, they'll never stop unless I disappear. I can't stay here anymore, Emma. Neither can my dad. For a moment, she was silent, studying his face. Then she reached out and took his hand. I'll come, she whispered. But we have to be careful. Together, they began planning, quietly, secretly. Train tickets under false names, a rented car waiting on the outskirts of the city. Emma would help secure Samuel's medical discharge early, and Ryan would withdraw the last of his savings. It wasn't much, but it was enough for hope. As dawn broke over Manhattan, Ryan looked out over the skyline, feeling the faint stirrings of freedom. For the first time in months, he could almost breathe again. But deep down, he knew the Novaks wouldn't let them leave so easily.
The Novak Hotel was eerily silent that night, its golden chandeliers dimmed and the usual chatter replaced by an uneasy calm. Ryan had finished his final performance, intending for it to be his last. His bags were packed at home, train tickets ready. By sunrise, he, Samuel, and Emma would be gone, free from the Novak's suffocating grip. But fate, as it often did, had other plans. Ryan was in the middle of quietly leaving through the service entrance when a voice echoed behind him, trembling yet unmistakably familiar. "Ryan, please don't go." He froze. Vanessa Novak stood at the end of the corridor, barefoot, wearing a silk robe that shimmered faintly under the emergency lights. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking as she clutched a half-empty bottle of pills. "Vanessa," Ryan said carefully, stepping closer, his heart pounding. "You shouldn't be here. It's late." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You can't leave me, Ryan. You can't." Her voice cracked like fragile glass. "I've given you everything, my love, my world, and you still choose her?" Ryan's chest tightened. "Vanessa, listen to me. This isn't love, it's pain for both of us." But she wasn't hearing him. Her voice grew louder, desperate. "You said you made me feel alive when you sang here. You smiled at me. You looked at me like I mattered." "That's not true," he said softly. "I respect you, Vanessa, but I can't live like this anymore. I have to take my father and go." Her expression darkened. "Then maybe I'll give you a reason to stay." Before Ryan could react, she opened the bottle and poured a handful of pills into her palm. His blood ran cold. "Vanessa!" he shouted, rushing forward. But she stumbled back, trembling, her tears streaming freely. "If you walk out that door, you'll never see me again." "Don't do this," he pleaded, grabbing her wrist. "You don't want to die. You just want to be heard." At that moment, the door burst open. Andrew Novak stormed in, his security detail behind him. His eyes went wide as he saw his sister on the floor, Ryan kneeling beside her. "What did you do to her?" Andrew roared, grabbing Ryan by the collar. "Nothing," he shouted. She needs help." Her sobs echoed through the hall as medical staff rushed in, forcing Andrew to release him. She was carried away, pale and trembling, leaving chaos in her wake. Andrew turned to Ryan, his face twisted with fury. "You've destroyed her," he spat. "If she doesn't survive this, I swear I'll make you wish you hadn't." Ryan stood frozen as Andrew's words cut through the air like knives. The escape he had planned so carefully had just ignited the storm he feared most, and there was no turning back now.
The morning light filtered softly through the chapel's stained glass windows, painting delicate hues of blue and gold across the aisle. It was quiet. So quiet that the faint rustle of Emma's gown seemed to echo like a song of defiance against the chaos they had endured. After weeks of fear, heartbreak, and uncertainty, this moment felt almost unreal. Ryan stood at the altar, his hands trembling slightly as he looked toward the door. He wore a simple gray suit, one borrowed from a kind neighbor, but his heart carried the weight of a man who had finally chosen love over fear. When Emma appeared, everything stilled. Her white dress was modest yet elegant, and her eyes, bright, steady, and filled with love, met his with a knowing calm. She had endured as much as he had: sleepless nights, constant threats, and the shadow of the Novak family lingering over them. But today she was radiant, unbroken. As she walked down the aisle, Ryan felt tears threaten to fall. Beside him, Samuel sat in the front pew, a cane resting against his leg, pride glowing on his weathered face. His recovery had been slow but steady, and though he still carried scars, both visible and unseen, his son's happiness had brought life back to his eyes. The ceremony was brief, no lavish decorations, no audience of hundreds, just a few close friends, a pastor, and the echo of two souls finally finding peace. "I do," Ryan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I do," Emma whispered back, her smile trembling with joy. When they kissed, it wasn't the cinematic passion of fairy tales. It was something quieter, deeper. A promise that no matter what storms might follow, they would face them together. Afterward, the three of them, Ryan, Emma, and Samuel, shared a simple meal at the small apartment they now called home. There was laughter for the first time in months, gentle music playing from an old radio, and a rare sense of safety. But even as Ryan held Emma's hand beneath the soft glow of candlelight, he couldn't completely silence the unease within him. He knew Andrew Novak's wrath was not easily forgotten. Still, for this one night, Ryan allowed himself to believe in peace, in love reborn from pain, in the miracle that two hearts, tested and torn, could still find their way back to each other. And as the clock struck midnight, he whispered against Emma's hair, "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." The Novak mansion stood under a blanket of cold rain, its marble floors echoing with silence and fury. In the grand study, Andrew Novak sat behind his mahogany desk, eyes fixed on the flames crackling in the fireplace. The empire he had built through charm and intimidation now felt tainted by humiliation. Humiliation brought on by one young man who dared to defy him. Ryan Carter. The name alone made his jaw tighten. He had given that boy a stage, a spotlight, a chance at fame, and in return, Ryan had given him betrayal, and worse, the heartbreak of his daughter, Vanessa. Vanessa stood near the window, her reflection pale and haunting. Since her failed suicide attempt, she had become quieter, colder, yet more dangerous in her silence. Her once vibrant eyes were shadowed by obsession and resentment. "Father," she said softly, not looking at him, "he doesn't deserve happiness. He made me believe in love, then abandoned me like I was nothing." Andrew leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. "No one makes a fool out of this family, Vanessa. Not Ryan Carter. Not anyone." She turned then, her lips curling into a fragile smile. "Then make him pay." That was all Andrew needed to hear. He reached for the phone, dialing a number known only to his most trusted associates. "Find him. Ryan Carter, his wife, his father. I want to know where they are, and I want it done quietly. Within days, word came back. The Carters were living in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of Manhattan. Ryan had resumed small performances at local cafes, Emma was working part-time at a clinic, and Samuel was still recovering. Andrew's expression hardened. He thinks he's safe. Vanessa stepped closer, eyes glinting with malice. Let's show him what safety costs. Their plan unfolded with chilling precision. Hired men began watching the Carters from a distance, tracking their routes, photographing their routines. Anonymous calls were made. Shadows lingered near their apartment late at night. It was a silent hunt, the calm before the inevitable storm. Meanwhile, Vanessa sat in her father's study each evening, staring at the flickering fire. "When he loses everything," she whispered, "maybe then he'll know what it felt like to lose me." Andrew said nothing, only nodded in grim agreement. Revenge had begun, cold, methodical, and unstoppable. And somewhere across the city, Ryan felt it, an unease crawling under his skin, a whisper in the dark that told him their past wasn't finished with them yet. The night was thick with fog and fear. Rain drizzled over the abandoned warehouse at the edge of the Hudson, where Andrew Novak's wrath had reached its darkest peak. The place smelled of rust and gasoline, the flickering light from a single bulb revealing the grim setup, a crude gallows-like structure built from iron beams and ropes. Ryan's heart pounded as he was dragged inside, his hands bound, his voice hoarse from shouting. "Andrew, where's my father? Where's Emma?" Andrew stood in the center of the warehouse, immaculate even in chaos, his tailored suit drenched, yet his composure frighteningly calm. "You took everything from me, Ryan. My sister's peace, my family's pride. Now you'll understand what real loss feels like." Ryan's breath hitched when he saw Samuel, weak, trembling, a rope tied around his neck, standing on a fragile platform above the cold concrete. Across the room, Emma was bound to a chair, gagged, eyes wide with terror. "Dad!" Ryan shouted, straining against the ropes. Samuel tried to speak, his voice barely a whisper. "Ryan, don't!" Andrew walked toward Ryan, his eyes icy and deliberate. "You will choose, Ryan Carter. Save your father," he turned, gesturing toward Emma, "or save the woman you claim to love. You can't have both." The words sliced through the air like knives. Ryan's world collapsed around him. His father's eyes, tired but full of love, met his, while Emma's tears glistened in the dim light. He could hear the faint creak of the rope, the shallow breaths of desperation. "Please, Andrew," Ryan begged, his voice cracking. "Don't do this. You've already won. Just let them go." Andrew smiled cruelly. "You made your choice long ago when you defied my family. Now, make it again." Ryan fell to his knees, mind spiraling in agony. Every heartbeat felt like an explosion. He could save his father, but Emma would die. Save Emma, and he'd lose the man who had sacrificed everything for him. And then Samuel's soft, steady voice broke through the madness. "Son, you've already given me everything I ever wanted. A reason to be proud." Ryan's head snapped up. "Dad, no!" With trembling strength, Samuel closed his eyes and kicked the platform. The rope tightened. Ryan's scream tore through the warehouse as he lunged forward, breaking free too late. Emma sobbed uncontrollably. as Andrew stood frozen, even he shaken by the sight. The echo of Samuel's sacrifice filled the silence. Ryan collapsed, his father's final words ringing in his soul. It wasn't a choice anymore, just unbearable loss and the burning rage of a son who had nothing left to lose.
The world seemed to shatter in that single, heart-wrenching moment. The sound of the rope tightening echoed through the warehouse like thunder, followed by the dull thud of Samuel's body going limp. "Dad!" Ryan's scream tore through the night as he lunged forward, the ropes around his wrists snapping under the surge of panic and fury. The beam above creaked and the light swung violently, casting long, broken shadows across the floor. Emma's muffled cries filled the room, her eyes pleading for Ryan to move, but he couldn't. Not yet. For a breath, a heartbeat, he just stood there, staring at the stillness of the man who had once been his entire world. His father, his mentor, his friend. Samuel Carter, the man who taught him to sing, to love, to fight, was gone. Andrew Novak lowered the gun he had been pointing, his face unreadable. Even he seemed momentarily struck by the gravity of what had happened. Vanessa's name slipped from his lips like a curse, as if blaming her ghost for everything that had spiraled out of control. Ryan turned slowly toward him, something shifting behind his tear-soaked eyes. The grief that had consumed him moments ago hardened into something else, something cold and unyielding. "You killed him," Ryan said, his voice trembling with rage. "You couldn't just let us live. You had to destroy everything good left in this world." Andrew's composure faltered, but only for a moment. "Your father made his choice. Now make yours. Save her or join him." Ryan's jaw clenched. Without another word, he bolted toward Emma, untying his ropes with trembling hands. She fell into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Ryan, I'm so sorry." He held her close, his tears mixing with hers. "No, Em. He wanted this. He wanted us to live." For a brief moment, time froze. The warehouse was filled only with the sound of rain hitting the metal roof and the creak of the dangling rope above them. Then Ryan's expression changed, grief transforming into resolve. He laid his father's body gently on the floor, brushing a hand across his still face. "I'll make it right, Dad. I swear I'll make them pay." Emma clutched his arm, her voice shaking. "Ryan, please, let's just leave." But Ryan stood tall now, his eyes burning with purpose. "No," he said softly, almost to himself. "It ends tonight." As thunder roared outside, Ryan turned toward the exit, ready to face the monster who had taken everything from him and to honor his father's final act of love.
Rain lashed against the glass facade of the Novak Grand Hotel as laughter and music filled its grand ballroom. The chandeliers glittered above New York's elite, oblivious to the storm brewing just outside. Beneath that opulent glow, Andrew Novak stood among his guests, wearing his trademark composed smile, a mask concealing the chaos he had unleashed. But that night, the storm wasn't only in the sky. It was walking through his front doors. Ryan Carter burst into the lobby, soaked, blood still smudged on his shirt from the warehouse. His eyes burned with grief and fury. Security guards rushed forward, but Ryan shoved past them, driven by something beyond pain, something primal and unstoppable. "Where is she?" he roared, his voice echoing through the marble hall. Upstairs, Emma sat bound in one of the hotel's lavish suites. Her wrists ached, her tears long dried. She could hear the faint hum of the party below, the sound of a world that had moved on without her. Her heart sunk until the muffled shouting reached her ears. Ryan's voice. Her eyes widened. He had come. Andrew's calm cracked for the first time when he saw Ryan storm into the ballroom, knocking over a waiter's tray. The crowd gasped, stepping back as chaos erupted. "You should have stayed gone, Carter," Andrew growled, his voice carrying through the stunned silence. Ryan's fists clenched. "You killed my father, you destroyed everything I had, and you still think I'd let you win?" Andrew signaled his men, but Ryan was already moving. A chair shattered, a glass crashed to the floor. The polished luxury of the ballroom turned into a battleground. Ryan fought with the desperation of a man who had nothing left to lose, his grief giving him strength. Andrew struck back, landing a brutal punch that sent Ryan sprawling across a table. The guests screamed and fled as the fight raged on, fists, glass, rage, and years of torment colliding in one violent storm. "Emma!" Ryan shouted, pushing past Andrew's grip. He sprinted toward the upper floor, following the sound of her muffled cries. Andrew staggered after him, gun in hand, fury twisting his face. "You'll never leave this place alive." Ryan reached the suite, kicked open the door, and rushed to Emma's side. She looked up at him, eyes wide with disbelief and relief. He tore the ropes from her wrists, whispering, "It's over, Em. I've got you." But behind him, the door creaked open, and Andrew stepped in, gun raised, trembling with rage and grief of his own. The final confrontation had begun.
The suite was silent except for the sound of thunder rolling across the Manhattan skyline. Ryan stood protectively in front of Emma, his body tense, eyes locked on Andrew's trembling hand that held the gun. The air smelled of gunpowder and fear. But then, another voice cut through the chaos. "Stop!" Vanessa Novak appeared in the doorway, her face pale and streaked with tears. Her eyes were wide and glassy, her movements frantic as she stepped inside, holding another gun, smaller, shaking in her hand. "Nobody moves," she screamed. Andrew froze. "Vanessa, put it down." She ignored him. Her gaze darted between Ryan and Emma, her breathing shallow, almost broken. "You were supposed to love me, Ryan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I gave you everything, and you still chose her." Ryan's heart pounded as he took a careful step forward. "Vanessa, you don't have to do this. No one has to get hurt." Her lip quivered. "You hurt me every day you looked at her that way." Her eyes flicked toward Emma, filled with raw, jealous fury. "If I can't have you, she won't either." Emma gasped, pressing closer to Ryan as Vanessa lifted the gun, her finger tightening around the trigger. "Vanessa, please," Ryan said, his voice cracking with emotion. "You're not this person. You're scared, confused." "Shut up," she shouted, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You think you know me? You never even tried." Andrew stepped forward slowly, desperation in his tone. "Vanessa, listen to me." "Don't you talk to me," she screamed, spinning toward him, gun now trembling in his direction. "You made me like this. You made me believe I could have anything, and now look at me." Ryan seized the moment, pulling Emma behind him. Andrew raised his own gun, pointing it at Ryan. "Don't move, Carter," he barked. It all happened in seconds. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, followed by the deafening sound of gunfire. Emma screamed. Ryan dove to the floor, dragging her down. The bullet tore through the air, then a second shot rang out. When the smoke cleared, Vanessa stood frozen, her gun slipping from her hand. Her eyes widened in shock as blood bloomed across her chest. She stumbled backward, collapsing to the floor. "Vanessa!" Andrew cried, rushing to her side. Her trembling hand reached out toward Ryan. "I just wanted you to see me," she whispered. Her eyes dimmed, her final breath leaving her lips. Ryan stood in stunned silence, grief and horror twisting in his chest. The room that once reeked of luxury now felt like a tomb. Andrew cradled his sister's lifeless body, his expression empty, his madness finally broken by the very thing he'd tried to control. And in that moment, Ryan realized the cycle of pain was ending, not through victory, but through loss.
Time fractured into chaos. The echo of the gunshot hung in the air like thunder that refused to fade. Vanessa lay on the floor, her white dress soaked crimson, the gun slipping from her fingers. Her eyes, once filled with arrogance and longing, now stared blankly at the chandelier above, catching its final shimmer of light. "Vanessa," Andrew's voice broke through the silence, raw and desperate. He fell to his knees beside her, shaking her shoulders. "No, no, 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 look at me." He pressed his hand against her wound, but the blood kept flowing, warm and unrelenting. "Stay with me, baby sister, please." Ryan stood frozen, his breath ragged, the world spinning around him. Emma gripped his arm, trembling, unable to process what had just happened. The acrid scent of gunpowder burned in the air, mingling with the faint perfume of Vanessa's fading presence. Andrew looked up, his face a mask of anguish twisted into fury, his eyes locked on Ryan, red, wild, unhinged. "You did this!" he roared, his grief transforming into madness. In one swift motion, he snatched up the fallen gun and aimed it straight at Ryan. "Andrew, stop!" Emma cried, stepping between them instinctively. But Andrew's finger was already on the trigger. "You took everything from me. My family, my pride, my—" The shot exploded before he could finish. Emma shoved Ryan hard, and the bullet whizzed past, tearing into the air where his chest had been. A second later, the sound of shattering glass filled the room. Vanessa, who had been lying still moments ago, convulsed. The bullet had struck her instead. Andrew froze. His weapon clattered to the floor. The noise of the world seemed to vanish. His hands trembled as he stared at his sister, the final breath leaving her lips. No, it wasn't supposed to be her. He fell back, collapsing beside Vanessa's lifeless body, his mind shattered under the weight of what he'd done. The once dominant, untouchable hotel magnate now sat in ruins, rocking back and forth, murmuring her name like a prayer no one would answer. Ryan and Emma stood side by side, the rain outside pounding against the shattered window. They watched Andrew sink deeper into silence, his face empty, eyes hollow. The man who once controlled everything was now destroyed by his own obsession. Ryan knelt for a moment beside Samuel's memory, whispering softly, "It's over, Dad." Then, taking Emma's trembling hand, he led her out of the suite. Behind them, the mighty Novak Empire crumbled into grief and madness, its final song ending in silence.
The first light of dawn crept over Manhattan, turning the wet streets into mirrors of soft gold. The city, that had once been cruel and unyielding, now stood quiet, its noise replaced by the hush of early morning. Ryan and Emma walked side by side, their steps slow, their bodies weary from the night's chaos. Blood still streaked Ryan's sleeve, and Emma's once white dress was torn and stained, but neither cared. They were alive. For the first time in what felt like forever, there were no threats, no orders, no eyes watching them from the shadows. Only the whisper of the wind and the distant hum of taxis in the awakening city.
Ryan's hand found Emma's, their fingers interlocking naturally, as if anchoring one another to the present. He glanced at her hair tangled, her face pale, but her eyes still carried warmth. She looked up at him and managed a trembling smile. "It's over," she whispered. Ryan stopped walking, staring into the horizon where the sun was breaking through the clouds. "Is it?" he asked softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I keep hearing his voice, Em. My dad. I see his face when I close my eyes." Emma stepped closer, placing her hand against his cheek. "He saved you so you could live. Don't let his sacrifice be in vain." Ryan's eyes glistened, a tear slipping down his face. "He believed in me, even when I didn't." "He still does," Emma said gently. "Every time you sing, every time you love, he'll be there." A faint smile crossed Ryan's lips. For the first time since his father's death, he felt the heaviness begin to lift, replaced by something fragile but real: hope. They continued walking, hand in hand, past flickering streetlights and shuttered cafes. The world around them slowly came alive again. Vendors setting up stands, the scent of coffee drifting through the air, and the faint melody of a street performer tuning his guitar. Ryan paused for a moment, watching the musician. "You hear that?" he said softly. "That's life, starting again." Emma squeezed his hand. "And it's ours now." He nodded, looking down at her with quiet affection. "Ours." As they disappeared down the quiet Manhattan street, the morning sun bathed them in gold. Their journey had been marked by loss, pain, and sacrifice, but now, beneath the pale sky, they found what they'd been searching for all along. Not fame, not revenge, freedom. And in each other's arms, they finally found home.